So I am here with Rosa Dawn. Um, say hi.
Oh, hi. Hi. Sorry.
Rose, I haven't known you for very long. I've only been following you for a few months now, but I've been going through your videos and actually educating myself because there's a lot of stuff that you cover. And well, let's start off by asking like who are you? Where did you come from? Like
Hmm.
tell me about your background. Like
Right. So, politically, I'm more on the centre right, what I would consider to be a classic liberal. I'm not someone who's I would consider to be very much. Oh, damn it. Sorry.
you're
Whenever
fine.
I try and talk about myself, I always end up stumbling. Try to paint like a big story, and it's always quite hard to do. So, basically, I just to kind of explain where it is that I came from. I came out as trans when I was about 18 or 19. I
Wait,
come
hold on, hold
from.
on. Wait, you're trans?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
So yeah, so I came out to started coming out to my friends as trans at around 18 or 19. I My transition was one which I wouldn't say it was easy, because I don't think any transition is easy, but it was one where I basically fended for myself. And I think that is something which kind of built me into the way that I am now. I didn't have a trans community around me to shower me with praise and hugs every single time I sneezed. I had to really work to get where I am. My transition was a bit rough at the start. I had to work a lot on my appearance, a lot on my voice, uh, but eventually I kind of did all this myself. I got myself through it. I got myself through the times where, where I was a bit sensitive about a lot of different.
One second, I need to turn off the AC. Sorry, the AC tends to interfere and
Right, yeah.
create a lot of noise. Go ahead.
That's it. So, do you want me to start from the beginning, or?
No, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, so during my transition, I found that I had to rely on myself a lot. A lot of my friends
Yeah.
would purposely distance themselves from me because they weren't comfortable with like me being trans. I kept on being told that it would have been better if I was gay. And bear in mind, these people hate gay people.
Yeah.
So I lost a lot from coming out, but on the other end, because of the amount of effort that I've put in, the lack of coddling from the community as a whole, I learned to be a lot more self-dependent, and
So I
I
want to
got.
ask you. Oh, sorry, I want to ask you a question. Why did you not get coddled by the community?
Well, it's
Uh,
because, I didn't know many trans people at the time. When I was in university, I was, as far as I know, the only trans person in the entire uni. That was, several thousand students. Nowadays, there will be a good couple of hundred,
yeah, I
but
know.
back then, I was the only one.
So
And
what about online? Did you not get any of that online? Like,
well, I did go on a couple of forums, but when I did encounter the whole cuddle culture, it was so full on and felt so much like a parody that it just instantly pushed me away even more. There was this website called Laura's Playground, which has been taken
I,
down now,
I know that.
and it was horrendous. But a
Yeah.
lot of these websites back then were. It was awful gifs of, like, these weird dolls and stuff. It was all very girly or
It
whatever. But these
was
were.
it was run by autogynophiles, a bunch of
Yeah.
cross dressers. Yeah.
Basically, yeah, but it was a whole party thing. But they were the only spaces you could go and talk to people, and the people in them were so weird. Like, you couldn't associate in any way. I remember, whilst I don't want to go into too much detail over it, I had a particularly difficult period with my mum, and I went to the forum, and this is the only time I ever really reached out to the community. And I did a post and I talked about my experience. And one of the first responses was someone saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe that this has happened. I told this member and this other member, we're all in the same house baking cookies. And we all started crying at the horrible treatment you received from your mother." And it's just all of this like 50s housewife style, like there's this weird house of trans women baking cookies and drinking tea and wearing frilly dresses, which probably does happen. And
Yeah.
it was so.
How old were these people, do you think?
Must have been in their 50s.
Yeah, because I imagine they're boomers with a very outdated idea of what it means to be a woman.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was just none of these people had anything that I would consider to be any kind of rational thinking of it. Like hell, Laura's Playground, I remember rightly, they had this thing set up where they wanted to found their own town in America called No Judgment, where it was going to be an entire town, like staff, everyone there was going to be trans, and it was meant to be no judgment. And instantly I just thought, you're just going to be known as the town of freaks, that like the town over is just going to drive over in their pickup vans with shotguns and go hunting. Like they were so off-putting in the way that they acted, and with no other interactions from trans people until I went to this conference with my university, NUS conference, National Union of Students. I just basically had next to no interactions with trans people because that pushed me away. And then when I went to the NUS conference there were more trans people. And at first there were a couple who I thought, this is actually a rational person. One of the people I met actually became one of my best friends, but she was like the only one. Like this is where I first encountered things like NBs, and there was a guy in a skirt and they were like, oh, he is trans. And I'm like, how? He's just a guy in a skirt. Like he's not doing anything else. And so I kind of came across that weirdness, but by this point I was already doing a lot for myself anyway. I never really needed to associate with them. And eventually I left uni. I got myself a couple of different jobs. I really had to work. I felt like I had to work extra hard in them because I thought, well, one of the few things I do hear from the trans community is how we're discriminated against in jobs. And so they're going to be looking for any reason to get rid of me. So I need to make sure that I'm working flat out and there's no way that they can fire me. And that actually drove me to succeed really well. Like I wasn't working in these places for too long before I got a much better job offer in London. And so I moved to London, and okay, I had a bit of unemployment after I left that particular job, but otherwise I've been, consistently going from strength to strength. And living in London, I have actually come across the trans community. And that by this point, I had already effectively, I was very near the end of my transition. I was like a few months away from having surgery. And so I'd already pretty much done everything. I'd got over the emotional hurdles that were needed. And what I came across was people posting trigger warnings, crying over misgendering when they've not put any effort into their appearance, pronoun badge.
Can you tell me
this would be around 2013.
I didn't realize it started that far back. Because the first time I ever heard about trigger warnings and all that, I think is around 2015. I didn't realize.
Trigger warnings have been around for a while.
Oh my God.
Yeah, much earlier than that.
To be honest, I for a while I sheltered myself from the trans community just because I was tired of their bullshit. So I didn't know that was a thing. Anyway, yeah, that's crazy. All right, so go ahead.
Yeah. So as I was saying, by this point, I'd already done a lot of my transition. I'd already worked through a lot of my own personal problems. And so when I came across the trigger warnings, the privilege arguments, it was like, I found it very jarring. And I quickly learned that there's no such thing as tough love with this community. It's all hugs and everything is solidarity. And so everyone becomes weak. they become very weak-willed. They get very angry at the people who they think are oppressing them, but they don't actually do anything constructive with that anger except for scream online or maybe go to a protest and scream. But they literally, it's just tantrums, and they love to wear this victimhood as a badge of honor. Like, to them, this is kind of like their personality. And I saw a lot of this with more and more people coming out as being trans, and they wouldn't do anything with their transition. They wouldn't even change pronouns or anything. They'd just be, I'm a tranny. And they would just get the hugs, and then they could be like, well, I'm oppressed because people don't recognize my gender. And I'm like, well, who the fuck cares? Like, you look like a dude. Like, but most of them were women. Like, in fact, the vast majority of these people are women. But I did actually, around the end of 2012, like, kind of, I know I'm jumping around in the timeline a bit here, but I did actually start a YouTube channel years ago detailing my transition. And
do you still have those videos?
I still have those videos, but they're no longer public.
Do you ever intend on releasing them, like edited, like just the dialogue or something?
What I will do is, I've said if I ever reach a particularly high threshold of subscribers, I will do a video where I take the piss out of them.
I truly hope that you exceed 700,000 subscribers.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Like, at the moment, I'm hoping one day, like, my big dream now is to get to 100,000. Like, I don't think that will ever happen. I think my channel is too niche, but that's kind of my, like, also, that's kind of like, yeah, I'm a YouTuber now if I hit that.
But you know what? Having a niche is important because it means that you're the person people go to for a particular thing.
Oh yeah, and it's one of the things that I found weird over the last couple of weeks when my channel has really taken off is the amount of people who are telling me, like, you know, you're a real voice in this community and stuff like that. And I'm kind of like, well, listen, the whole point of the channel was basically for me to vent about a lot of stuff that I didn't see anyone else talking about. And I felt that the only other people who generally weren't trans themselves. So they would just instantly be dismissed as being cis oppressors or whatever. And so the point of the channel was as a way of criticizing like intersectionality and identity politics, because these are things that I strongly disagree with. I thought that the angle that I could really take with it is trans issues. Now, it wasn't originally going to be only trans issues. So I was going to cover a lot more politics, but the trans issues is what I'm known for now. The videos that I've done that aren't on trans issues kind of flopped. Like, no one watched them. But so I focus exclusively on trans issues because there's so much to talk about in the news. Like, so when I'm being told that, oh, I'm a voice and stuff like that, I kind of find that very weird. Like, I don't think I'm that much of a voice or a leader or anything like that. I don't see myself as that. But it's strange. Going back to, sorry, I realize I'm all over the place in this.
You're fine, because that's how my videos go all the time.
Just to explain, last night, or like in this morning, whatever, 3 a.m, a car pulled outside my flat and started blasting out really loud grime music for an hour and a half.
I'm sheltered. What is grime music?
Grime is kind of like London hip hop.
Okay.
And so they're blasting that out for about an hour, like a good hour and a half, and I couldn't get back to sleep afterwards. And like real heavy bass. I had to call the police on them.
Like, we have assholes like that in America.
Mm-hmm. So I've not had a lot of sleep, so I apologize if I am very rambly, which I know that I am right now. So
you're fine.
So going back to the my old channel. So it did get a couple of views. Like, videos would often get about 1,000 views. Like, one of them got about 12,000. That was, you know, until a few weeks ago, it was genuinely the biggest video I ever did.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, especially for the time. In fact, if I had stuck with it, I probably would be a very big YouTuber now. But one of the things that kind of put me off was I remember sharing video of it was kind of like on the run up to my surgery. I put it on Reddit, and my video was deleted from the Reddit page. So I messaged one of the moderators asking, I'm talking about my upcoming surgery. I thought people might want to know about this and how good this is. And the response I got was a big list of all the people that I have privilege over, which is, this was a giant paragraph. Like, this person just, put it this way. I think the most insane one was, I have privilege over people who don't even know that they are trans. And I'm like, that makes no sense.
Everything doesn't have to be oppression.
Yeah.
Everything doesn't have to be this hierarchy of oppression. And like, for that matter, it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't be having conversations because our countries or people can't. Like, really, at some point, they have to realize that they're shooting themselves in the foot.
But yeah, that seemed to be the general like mindset behind a lot of people was, yeah, you can't talk about positive things here. You can only talk about the negative. Talk about how, like, how hard our lives are. And I think one of the things that I want to show with my channel is actually kind of cutting through a lot of the bullshit that's coming out of the community. Yeah. There's so many channels where, and there's some good trans YouTubers who do the very much positive. My transition, I've had this surgery. Look, we're going to do some lol things about transitioning or whatever.
Think about this. It's inspiring hope. It shows people, see, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. Someone else has made it there.
Exactly. There's a lot of channels that are good at that. But the thing is, it's been so long since I kind of transitioned. Like, the closest I've ever come to doing anything like that is my FFS videos, which I'll probably be doing another one now that I've got more subscribers, to see if anyone has any questions on the process.
I've got a question. Do you think that maybe the reason why they don't want to share this hope and all that is because they have people that don't really put in any real effort, and they don't want to take ownership of that? And so this is just how they coddle themselves by saying, well, it's not your fault, it's the system. It's everybody else.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of the big problems with the left in general is they don't take responsibility. Like, communism has never been tried. Socialism has never been tried. It was never real socialism. It was state capitalism, because they can't accept the responsibility that their ideology has immense flaws in it. And you see the same kind of rhetoric coming out of the trans community, where they don't take responsibility. Society has the wrong idea of what it means to be a woman or a man. The government is the one that's oppressing you, because they don't allow you to have your passport show that you are an NB. So they're not allowing you to exist, even though these people seem to live just fine. They're not getting rounded up and sent off to camps, but you would think that they were if you listened really to what they're saying, because that's how they paint it. But I think a lot of this is about control as well. Like, they don't like it when people break from the herd. And this is a big thing at the left. Like, you will see trans people who are on the right being called, like bootlickers, like true scum, all of these kinds of things. You'll see it with like biological women. You'll see it with black people being called Uncle Toms. Like, you get so many of these different reactions, and it's not kind of like exclusively trans people hating one particular group. It's like intersectionality on the left. Anyone who doesn't follow what the community says is an outcast, because you're a threat. You're a threat to the way in which they think. And when you tell people that they can't achieve anything, that the whole system is out to kill them, not just like keep them down, when you push narratives like trans people are being literally killed by TERF rhetoric, when I cannot think of a single murder that's ever been as a result of something that, say, Julie Bindel ever said. But they will paint that image. It's like, no, if our opponents speak out against us, we will die. And it breeds weakness. And then, especially when you look at these people, one of the things that I don't like when I do it, but I know that I do this. But when I critique people's appearances, it's not so much I'm saying, "God, they're ugly. Look at that ugly," although some of them clearly are. But it's the absolute lack of effort on their part. And there's so many of these people in the community that just don't put on any sort of effort. They don't try and make themselves look the way they want the world to see them. They'll just throw on a crap dress, and because they never have good style. They wear the same boots. They will wear. There's people I know who wear things like ridiculous big pearl necklaces, like the kind of thing that you would see in a costume. Like they literally go to a costume shop.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. I saw a video of someone that looked exactly like they were cosplaying as a woman, but in like a very old fashioned, but really nice looking dress and boots. But it just looked like a parody. No one would actually dress like that.
Yeah, and that's it. They don't put. They don't, because they live in this bubble as well. They don't know what normal people look like and dress like. Like the queer community is incredibly sloppy when it comes to presentation, and yes, they embrace the sloppiness.
Yeah, I think that they do that on purpose. It's almost like they're flaunting the sloppiness to subvert society expectations.
Oh yeah, that's kind of the whole thing behind it. They don't, fuck society, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the healthiest thing when you just want to be a trans person that just gets along with your life. If you're all into queer theory, Antifa kind of stuff, great. I mean, you're not exactly going to have much hope in life anyway. But if you want to make an effort and you end up getting stuck in with these people, some of them are very well-meaning. Some of them are absolutely lovely. But the overarching ideology behind it is incredibly damaging to trans people. And it's why I would encourage a lot more people to start looking away from the left and actually look at being an individual here, and not just in the way the trans community tries to paint it as you can express in any gender you want. Because they're not being individualist. What they're saying is that they're not just saying you can identify however you want. They want society, they want everyone to recognize you as whatever you say you are. But they don't, when you're looking at it from a more individualist point of view, if I want society to treat me in a particular way, I need to show them that I'm serious in being that particular way. Which, for me, I think is a very healthy mindset for a trans person to have if you want to have a good transition. Yeah. If you want people to actually pay attention to you and treat you with respect, if you look like a sloppy mess, if you're just looking like a trucker that is just, completely a big beer gut, not properly shaven, crap hair, no effort to pass, you can't expect people to treat you like a woman. And
so let me ask you a question then. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question that is from a leftist perspective, which is, what is wrong with society accepting 5 o'clock shadowed trucker men portraying themselves as women? If everybody did that, what's wrong with that? Why can't we just change the labels and everybody accept everybody by whatever they call themselves arbitrarily? Wouldn't that be a truly free world?
Well, that will never happen. That's just a fantasy. I can't say that's it. That's not an answer. That's not that kind of response is one of their go-to responses. Wouldn't it be great if we did this? Wouldn't it be great if we got rid of all the factory owners and the landlords and stuff? Okay, but this thing is never going to realistically happen. So there's no point in me answering it. It's like saying, wouldn't it be great if we had Pokemon? Yeah. That would be. I would love to have my own Eevee. It's literally never going to happen though. So why bother answering it? They don't you don't even explain how they're going to change society's idea of it. Well, what by having people walk around dressed like women with beards and say I'm a woman? Well, society's not going to see them as a woman with a beard. They're going to see them as a man in a dress.
Well, if let's look at it this way: if you have a whole generation raised on an atmosphere where everybody, you have bearded women, butch women, whatever, you have a whole mix of everything, and you call that woman or you call that man, even though there's so much variety, I think from my perspective is, well, then you've just rendered these labels completely obsolete. But
oh yeah, well that's it. Well, they've already done that with being trans. Trans is anyone who says they are. I mean, that's one of their own mantras. But then these are people who are very much down with labels. So to them, it was part of the weird irony. They say they're down with labels, yet they make up labels for absolutely everything, and then say they're
down
rebels.
with labels, except for the labels that happen to be advantageous. So
Oh yeah,
if that label gives you a status, an oppression status, by all means use that label. Say that you're oppressed. So,
oh, yeah.
for example, you can talk about Yaniv and say, well, this is a man that is cyber stalking young girls online, trying to share child pornography, has this weird, crazy tampon fetish, wants to see young girls topless at a swimming event. But that's all forgivable because this person's trans and they're therefore oppressed. So we need to overlook everything else.
I mean, with the defense with Yaniv, I have seen a few people in the community actually be saying, okay, this person is Yaniv is a shitty person, but then they'll immediately say, oh, but this doesn't mean you should misgender her. And I'm like, well, like, I don't give a shit. Jonathan Yaniv is a horrible human being. He's like, I have literally no respect for him as anything. So I don't care about whether I'm misgendering or whether that's invalidating to him. He's clearly taking advantage of what it is to be trans. That you look through his background and there's the whole I am trans thing comes out of nowhere. Like, it's a complete blindsight. But yeah, they don't. The left in general like to use labels to their advantage. You're absolutely right on that. But ultimately, none of this matters because you can only get all of this stuff changed if you get everyone to agree with you. And they're all very much talk about the end game of this stuff. Like, the end game of this whole gender radical revolution is to, everyone can identify as anything and everyone has their own unique gender, but they never say how they're going to get there. And so far, the only progress I see them making is just screaming at people to bend the knee. And you can only get so far with that. Like,
I mean, even if they did get there, is that someplace we want to be, and at what cost? Because from my perspective, literally everything they're doing is trying to control people.
Oh, and it is. It's all control.
They're robbing them of their free will, their ability to even think. You can't even think wrong, right? So that's like totally 1984. But instead of it being the government that you have to worry about, it's a socially engineered society, right? So I don't trust any of this anyway. I don't trust social media, which is where these people develop, where they incubate in their echo chambers. I don't trust the algorithms at all. And I think that this is where they're being radicalized, where all this crazy rhetoric is, and where their ability to critically think is being conditioned out of them. That's what it seems like to me. I want to ask you a question. Why aren't you on the left? Like why didn't you start off on the left, or did you start off on the left?
Well, I only started off on the left insofar as I thought that I fell for the lie that the left pushes, that the right wants to kill everyone who isn't straight and white and like cis or whatever. And that is a narrative I have heard from so many people, or even friends on the left. It's like, well, we just want to help and they just want to kill people. But I've always thought of myself like economically as being right wing. But I would always say that I was on the left because I thought, well, for me, the most important, at the time especially, I wasn't hugely clued up on economics. I'm way more aware of it now. But at the time, I would think, well, I just want freedom and respect or whatever for like these groups. You shouldn't be like, the government shouldn't stop you from doing things because you are say, black or whatever. I don't want people to be killed because of their race. And eventually I realized that, no, the right isn't inherently racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic. Yes, you can get racist, whatever, people on the right, but you can also get it on the left. The difference is the left doesn't consider itself to be capable of racism.
Well, no, because their racism is against the racists. They're against the oppressors. And if you are white, cis, hetero, abled, then any prejudice they exert against you is really just equity. It's just
well, they don't consider anything to be like, there's no such thing as sexism against men, there's no such thing as racism against whites, but like they don't even consider themselves to be capable of racism, like say most relevant one at the moment, anti-Semitism. The left considers itself completely incapable of anti-Semitism, and so when it does crop up on the left, they just say, well, it's not actually anti-Semitism because Palestine.
Yeah.
And not realizing that they're actually being anti-Semitic as they equate all Jews with Mossad in Israel. But it's that they know what's best for people. Like they never actually hang around with the working class, but they will always tell you that they know what's best for the working class. And they will always be, when the Great Revolution comes, these will be the great minds that will tell everyone how great this new utopia is. But they're never the ones who work the fields, are in the factories, are mining.
I actually want to ask you about that. I've noticed something, and that is that they tend to focus less on class and more on characteristics. Maybe even individual characteristics. Why is it less class-based? And that seems to be the one thing that really divides us and pits us against one another. Instead of because you could unite everybody on a class basis. But why is that?
Well, it's kind of it's kind of an evolution from Marxism. They've just changed classes from being the proletariat and the bourgeoisie to classes based around your characteristics, as it were, or identities. So, and there's no way of like in communism, there isn't really any way of kind of moving up or down in these class systems. You are what you are. And it's the same kind of thing, supposedly, with intersectionality, except now you can self-identify as trans, as disabled, as bi.
So, go ahead.
So, I think a lot of it is an evolution of Marx. But also on top of that, a lot of these people are middle class. A lot of them are quite well off. So if they did have a go at the class system in that way, they would effectively be shooting themselves in the foot and admitting to the world that they are the ones with the privilege. You won't for example, there's a writer called Laurie Penny, who is one of these people who very much pushes the intersectionality arguments that the left loves so much. But she's upper class. I believe she went to Cambridge. She's only ever been a journalist and has traveled all around America and whatever. She writes at The Guardian, has lots of these well-paid writing jobs. And I've actually met her a couple of times. She's okay as a person, but she would still argue that she's oppressed by insert group here.
So I want to ask you a question. You mentioned that they're being herded, right? This leftist collective is being herded like sheep. Now, in Christianity, they refer to the church as the church's flock, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see?
They are the shepherd.
Right, they're the shepherd, right? So God's their shepherd, their priest is their shepherd, whatever. But do you see this leftism and collectivism and identitarianism and intersectionality? All this is
a religion.
It is a religion. All right.
It is a religion. I mean, when you have a look at socialist governments throughout history, you'll see a lot of them have real opposition to anyone having any sort of organized religion. That there have been huge crackdowns, and not just in the socialism, communism, but in fascism as well. They don't want there to be a higher power than the state.
Right.
They want or at least in communism or socialism, they'll just phrase the state to the people, but it's effectively the same thing.
So they get indoctrinated, right? And
Oh yeah,
they're not really allowed to question the faith, but they do have apologists for it. So even when there's
yes.
inconsistencies, they still have those apologists that find ways of using mental gymnastics to justify things.
Oh yeah, it's like when you have Venezuela, for example, and they'll blame US sanctions on oil for a reason why people are now eating garbage. And the US sanctions on oil didn't come out till about, I think it was February this year. And so people had already been eating garbage for quite a while before America did anything. But they could never point at what exact sanctions is it that led Venezuela to the way it is now, as opposed to them massively overspending when oil prices were massively decreasing. They could never really give much or an answer other than America did it.
Mm. That's pretty consistent with what I've seen too. So that's a kind of a weird state, I think. What do you think the outcome of all this is going to be, though? You've got this weird religion that likes to divide people from their own. Otherwise, they might be independent people, but they divide them from their own, using their own individuality against them. I think that's exactly what it is. Like it's perverting something that's good. Individuality is a wonderful, beautiful thing, but they encourage people to be individualistic, separate them from their own, and then collect them and make them part of their own little collective.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's it, because in order to break away from one collective, you kind of need to be your own person to move to the other. And I think that's the way that the trans community in particular looks at things like individualism. Because they're simply, their whole mindset isn't that of an individual. Like, it is entirely collectivist. Everything which they do. They don't care about it.
They've got heresy too, right? So
absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, True Scum, Bootlicker, a token. Like I've been called like a token for the right, a token for the alt-right. True Scum, I've been called a TERF. I've been called like everything really. Like and then they come out with that, as opposed to refuting anything I ever say. And like I do read the comments on my videos, and when I get these criticisms from the trans community, it will just be bootlicker, or it will be, you look like a man, you have a big man face with big man hands. And I'm like,
it sounds like the kind of comment that Jessica Yaniv would make. Try to get as personal as possible, as nasty as possible.
Oh yeah, and that's what they do. Like they don't like it when you criticize someone who just looks like a hippo. But like, they will go nasty on you if you dare break the flock. And when they say, listen to trans people and stuff, they don't mean people like us. They mean them. They only mean them. They don't want anyone else to speak out against it. And as a result of that, they effectively control the narrative in the mainstream media. Like when you think about like the biggest alternative voice to all this in the world for trans people is literally Blair White.
Yeah.
Literally her. And who comes behind her? Like Calvin Garrett, but I'm not sure what his politics are. Like that, there is really not many. There's certainly no one in the UK. The closest that you would ever find are themselves these gender critical trans people who are effectively radical feminists, only they are transsexual people. Right. And so they approach everything from their own brand of collectivism and their own brand of like leftist thinking.
Something that I've believed for a while is that there is a much larger portion of the trans community that dissents from the trans radicals, that completely dissents from that, but they're too chicken shit to actually come out and speak because they're worried about either being ostracized from the community or they're worried about being deplatformed. And I've seen it happen where they have been deplatformed. That's a real threat that people face.
Oh, it is. Like, you get people who will send like death threats and stuff. And friends of mine actually like got some really, really strong threats for writing an article that critiqued non-binary people. Like, it got to a point there where there was a guy, a cis guy, who talked about how he wanted to use a chainsaw on her, a trans woman, and that was fine because everyone understood his anger.
Oh wow.
So you know, I've seen how they can get, and I don't, especially if you are a kind of trans person where your life is the community. If your life is the community, you cannot speak out because you will be ostracized. They will label you as like not a good person, problematic, and so you will lose friends. Like, whereas with me, yes, I have some friends that are within the queer space or whatever, but because I've always effectively distanced myself enough from all of this, and even when I'm around them, I've always been very open about what my thoughts are and stuff, and that will usually be in one-to-one interactions where I can let them take their guard down a little bit. Like, the amount of times I've been told, like, oh, I'm so glad to hear a trans person say this because I'm not allowed to say it at all from people within the community. Like, there is people who want to speak out. But the second they do, a big name in the community will instantly crack the whip and make everyone get in line. Like, an example of this I can think of was, there was this article on, can't remember what website it was. It might have been on Medium or something like that, which was like something about the Church of Social Justice and how the way that people call out culture is becoming a bit too much and everything is now problematic. And someone on Facebook posted it, and all of a sudden you could kind of tell that, like, there were people in the community who also agreed, and people started voicing their agreement. So, like, oh yes, everything is getting far too much. And then a big name Tranna stomped her way into the conversation and reminded everyone that they all have privilege. And this is really problematic. At which point, everyone cowered.
No one laughed at that. No one actually laughed at that person. Because I think the proper response is to laugh at how absurd that is. But what you're saying is they capitulated. They do
instantly.
They acknowledge their privilege and bowed out because that's not their place. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them will. They always check their privileges. These are the kind of people who will, like, constantly make I've checked my privilege today on this, and this. And so we need to listen to these marginalized voices. Like, I find the whole idea of marginalized voices hilarious because if you want to talk about marginalized voice, my voice in the community, where the hell are my invites to TV? Like, you can seem to get anyone wearing a frock can just rock up to, like, Piers Morgan and they'll get a slot on Good Morning Britain and they will just talk about how hard their life is. And it's been that way for years. But someone like me, you know, I don't see that ever happening. Like, could you imagine the kind of absolute shit show that would happen if someone like me talked about this?
I would love to see that.
Oh, I would. Like, I don't want to be one of these people that's trying to push, like, oh, I want to break it into mainstream or whatever. But I genuinely want to go on something like Piers Morgan and actually talk about this and just
I genuinely want you to go mainstream because here's what I think. So we're talking about people who are too scared through being intimidated, bullied, otherwise deterred from speaking out on the platform, is because you have such a large mob for the other tribe, for this collective, the collective versus the individualists. And I think if you had enough people speaking out, enough high profile figures, and then you get enough of a following, people supporting you, I think, and if you went mainstream and more people followed suit, then you'd build up that resistance against that collective, and more people would feel courage to speak out. It's because it's kind of like the bandwagon thing, but it's really safety in numbers, right?
Oh yeah.
So no, you just got to build that up.
No, I agree. I think that like the more voices like ours are actually out there, the better. And I think an important thing to remember is the trans community, the way that it's going, is eventually going to step on too many toes. Like, they don't think, because they're in their own bubble and they have this idea of, well, we're fighting for our liberation, so everything we do is great and pure. And a lot of these things people don't care about. I mean, why should your average Joe, who's got to think about their, how to put food on the table, provide for their family, their own hobbies and interests, their own political beliefs, whether they have a religion, whether they have any health concerns, they got to deal with all of this stuff every single day. And then they've also got to acknowledge the fact that there are people who identify as the moon. It is simply not a reasonable request for someone. Like, non-binary stuff, I think, pushes things a bit too far because it takes it to the absurd. And when you see people coming up with their own pronouns and wearing pronoun badges, it's ripe to be made fun of, because I don't see how anyone could take any of this seriously, or why someone should take it seriously. Like, if a trans woman wants me to refer to them as a woman, I will do so if they put in effort. I'm not saying they have to pass. I'm not saying they have to be stunning or flawless or whatever. They just have to put in some effort, and I'll give them the pronouns, but they got to earn them pronouns, and a lot of people don't. But with NBs, it's next to impossible to earn a pronoun. How the hell do you become across as a they? You can come across as very androgynous, and you can kind of look like an alien, but that's kind of the most someone can really do it without you looking at them and thinking instantly that's a woman or that's a man.
But do you ever question whether or not, like, that's legitimate? Like everyone, like, do you ever, like, profile someone and break down, like, why is this person identifying as a they? Is it because they're really non-binary, or is it because they're rejecting, say, feminine or male stereotypes? It's like an indictment on social normatives. And so instead of just doing your own thing, they have to try and redefine themselves so they don't feel judged. I have to wonder about that. I don't honestly think that most people that identify as trans or non-binary are actually trans. Or
no, I think a lot. I don't think many are at all. I think that there are and one thing I want to make clear is, when I say that I don't think this person is trans, I wouldn't do that based on a whim, and I certainly wouldn't do that because I disagree with them. And like, one of my big problems with gender critical trans people is they are very quick to label anyone who disagrees with them as like, oh, they're not actually trans. Like, hell, I've seen them do it with Blair White. And right. I just think, a lot of you people don't look that great, and you're going to judge her because, oh, she puts on so much makeup, or like, oh, they'll be saying he puts on so much makeup, and I'm just like, well, you fucking weirdo.
These people don't believe in gender, only sex. I think that's a lot of gender critical, and so as far as they're concerned, you're playing into the plan of the patriarchy. You're perpetuating systems of oppression. One thing I've noticed with the gender critical feminists, I don't know why, but there's this theme, like, when they try to define what it means to be a woman, I saw this one thread the other day, literally everything in that thread was about oppression. So in other words, what it means to be a woman is to be oppressed. So if you haven't had all of this kind of oppression, then you're not a woman. That's insane to me. And it's a really shitty definition of femininity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, all of it, like, the rad femmes and the trans activists are two sides of the same coin. The only areas where they really differ is their general reaction to things. Trans activists are quite young, and they're so used to screeching at people that they come out with a lot of violent rhetoric. Whereas with the rad femmes, the line which they always use is, things like you hate women and girls. You're perpetuating misogyny. You're part of the patriarchy. Trans activists in turn will say, well, you're transphobic. And both sides will just, all they do, they just label each other. It's just like, you're like...
Well, you know what, the whole point of that label is to shut down the conversation.
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, both sides can be so hypocritical about it. Like, really, really frustratingly hypocritical.
And I think one of the things I've noticed is a pattern among gender critical feminists, and it's not all of them, because I have some people that follow me that are absolutely fine, and
absolutely.
So there's a big difference between being gender critical and what a lot of these people call gender critical, and I think it really is a cover for misandry, right?
Yeah. That definitely is. I mean, again, because these people are on the left and men are a oppressor class, they don't consider it to be a real thing. Like they played the same mind game of they are oppressors, oppression, you know, like hatred of this equals power plus privilege or whatever. They use the same mathematics. So you'll never get these people to actually say we hate men. They will dart around it to be like, well, what I'm doing is fine, but you are the bad one. Do as we say, not as we do.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you hear that same kind of that tactic of skirting around, putting a finger on it instead of calling a spade spades, instead of calling themselves what they are. I see that also with the ethno-nationalists. Instead of admitting they're flat out racist, it's like, oh no, we're not racist. We just have white pride and shit like that.
Oh yeah.
But, yeah.
Oh no, lots of people do it because they don't want to say that they are hateful people. They don't want to say that they actually hate people based on a particular thing. And believe me, I've come across gender critical feminists who do hate trans people simply because they are, or trans women in particular because they are trans women. And they will never openly say that they hate trans people. They'll just be like, well, you know, they will dart around it, make a song and dance, and then just throw it back in your face and say, well, you are a misogynist. You hate women and girls. Disagree with us? Well, you clearly want to kill and rape a bunch of innocent girls because that's what your kind does. And it's an incredibly frustrating rhetoric to hear, and it's why I don't think they're actually going to get the big success they think they will in the long term, because they can be so similar. And to their credit, I think there are more people on that side who do see it than on the trans side, but there's still too much of it. And you still have the same thing of the bigger voices cracking the whip and making sure everyone gets in line. Like, hell, I remember someone on Twitter, I think she kept on making new accounts and was getting deleted, and she went from being quite moderate to really hardcore anti-trans in the space of a month. Oh, wow. And I remember one of her last ever tweets was something like, TERF is genocidal hate speech. And I thought, that's pathetic.
Yeah.
Like, that's, I just had, I completely lost all respect for this person after that point.
Yeah. So obviously she was absorbing a lot of the rhetoric. And the thing is, the worst part about this is that there's always a grain of truth behind anything, and so they grow off of that, and it ends up transforming into something completely different. But like there is real prejudice and hatred towards people who identify as gender critical, and of course they'll never call themselves TERFs, but like for example, Rachel, what's her name? Is it McKinnon?
Rachel McKinnon, yes.
Yeah. She wanted,
oh, God.
Yeah, the shit that she said about TERFs and wanting them to die violently.
Yeah, well, I think that she was banned on Twitter for like an hour or so, and then big name people got involved to bring her back, and I thought that's.
And then she had the audacity to have her background
be her with a brick.
Yeah, and fire behind her.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that. Like you get, and that's the other thing. I with the trans side, they certainly don't listen to exactly what it is that they're saying, and they certainly don't see the amount of times you like kill TERFs, fuck TERFs, all of this kind of stuff. Like, as much criticism as I can give to the gender critical side, I think there's like literally one occasion on all my time on Twitter where I've come across someone who's just like, kill these people. Whereas with trans activists, you see it all the time.
Okay, so right here, what I'm doing is removing the portion of the conversation where I go off the deep end and talk about crazy conspiracy theories, as I tend to do. And I believe I made Rose very uncomfortable. This isn't a subject that she's comfortable with. She's not very knowledgeable about these kinds of things, and I'm pretty sure I pushed her buttons. So, for the sake of preserving her dignity, I'm removing it. Yeah, sorry about that. All right, but anyway, I did enjoy talking with you.
Oh no, I did as well. I enjoyed it as well. Sorry, I just kind of had to cut it a bit short and just the stupid fucking car. But yeah, it's been interesting. It really has.
Yeah, sorry if I came off as crazy, conspiratorial. I wear tinfoil hat and all that.
No, it's fine.
Well, I'm from Texas, and I think that's where Alex Jones lives too. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you for agreeing to the conversation, and you have a good night.
You too. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.